Hello everyone, I'm Tripolar Bear, and today's League Starter is an ability called Toxic Rain. Toxic Rain makes a great League Starter because of its strong, overlapping damage over time pods that scale with gem levels and minimum investment. Toxic Rain is a bow skill that shoots arrows into the air. These arrows will rain down and leave spore pods where they land. Each pod deals chaos damage over time and slows enemy movement, making bosses much easier to dodge. These pods can overlap and stack their chaos dot damage, which is where the true power of Toxic Rain comes from. Being a bow skill also allows us to take advantage of Mirage Archer, a little buddy on your shoulder that shoots toxic rains, so you can skip attacking a couple packs every once in a while. Before we move on though, let's talk about how Toxic Rain works, as there seems to be many misconceptions within the community. First of all, the pods have two hits. There is one hit when the arrow lands, and the next is the pods exploding. Second, the damage over time component comes from the vines on each pod. There is no limit to the number of vines that can attach to one enemy, but the game will only show so many vines as not to crash your game. Third, adding projectiles to Toxic Rain increases the amount of arrows raining down and therefore the number of pods on the ground. Duration will scale the time our pods are around for, starting at 1 second and scaling up. One last thing to know for this ability is that obtaining increased area of effect will cause the pods to overlap much easier, but this does not make the pods spread out anymore. If that doesn't make much sense, I can put it very simply for you. Bigger, better, smaller, bad. Now, let's talk about why we chose Trickster over Pathfinder. Let's start with Pathfinder, with the biggest pro of being a Pathfinder being the huge 50% increased area of effect, allowing pods to overlap much easier. As a Pathfinder, you also pick up 20% flask effect, which helps us hit the 50% effect threshold to obtain an additional projectile from Dying Sun, alongside 50% increased speed and evasion rating from our Quicksilver and Jade Flask. We would also obtain 15% movement speed and 20% attack speed during any flask effect. From Nature's Boon, we would receive 6% reduced elemental damage taken, 3 flask charges per 3 seconds, and 20% chance to not consume flask charges. Lastly, we would become immune to all elemental ailments during any flask effect. Now, the big argument for becoming a Pathfinder is the 50% area of effect, which is really good once you get your character geared up. As Pathfinder, you focus on flasks and effect duration. So another great thing about the Pathfinder is that we can anoint Hardened Scars, which is a unique anoint not available on the skill tree. This anoint specific node gives you Fortify during any life flask effect, and so we'll use a hybrid flask with the Enduring Flask modifier to give us free Fortify with a very nice uptime, since Pathfinder gives free flask charges and a chance to not consume flask charges. Now, these are all very amazing things from Pathfinder, but with Trickster, we are going to get a total of 34 attack and cast speed and 15% energy shield just from our minor notables and having Ghost Shrouds. We already have more attack speed than the Pathfinder would have gotten. Alongside this, on Patient Reaper, we receive 50% increased damage over time and life, energy shield, and mana recovery on kill. We will also obtain Ghost Shrouds, which are a buff that has a maximum of 3 charges, with 1 charge generating per 2 seconds. If we get hit, we lose 1 Ghost Shroud, but we gain 4% of our total evasion rating as energy shield. We also get 6% reduced damage taken while we have 3 Ghost Shrouds, and 10% movement speed while we have energy shield. We also gain free evasion and energy shield from Escape Artist, which gives us energy shield based on the evasion rating on our body armor, as well as evasion rating based on the energy shield from our helmet. On top of all of this, we are immune to stuns while we have any Ghost Shrouds, and we have an additional 10% dodge to spell hits while we have any energy shield at all. Lastly, we obtain Prolonged Pain, giving us 20% increased skill effect duration, 10% reduced damage taken from damage over time, and a whopping 20% more damage over time. This 20% more damage over time gives us 30% of our total damage in the cheap gear setup. With how amazing the benefits from Ghost Shrouds are, and the general life recovery and damage benefits, I really believe Trickster is much, much better for a League starter. Now, if you make this as a second or third character and boost the gear up for that character, you should consider Pathfinder, as the 50% area of effect and flask effect is an actual huge bonus for Toxic Rain. It lets you overlap so many more pods, but in the League start scenario, Trickster cuts out ahead, as we will not have the gear to take advantage of all those extra overlaps just yet. Let's talk about some of the struggles of playing this build. This build is going to be a dodge and evasion build, which means that sometimes you're going to fail your dodge chance and you're going to fail your evade chance. You might get hit and you might die. In these Legion encounters on some rippy map mods, you might get one shot. We will rely mainly on our mechanical skill and letting Mirage Archer deal damage while running so that we can run away from any spooky bosses or encounters while still doing damage. Now, let's talk about how our Toxic Rain will scale its damage. Primarily, Toxic Rain will scale off of Chaos Damage Overtime Multiplier, Area of Effect, Duration, and additional arrows. Other smaller sources of scaling come from Chaos Damage, Damage Over Time, and Projectile Damage. For our single target ability, we will still use Toxic Rain, but we will also be putting down Wither Totems. Wither is a debuff that makes enemies take increased chaos damage. After these are down, all we need to do is spam our Toxic Rain down on the boss. For our defenses, we will be using Acrobatics and Spell Acrobatics, as well as Wind Dancer. Wind Dancer gives us 20% less damage taken and 40% less evasion rating if we haven't been hit recently, but we get 20% more evasion rating if we have been hit recently. This, combined with our Ghost Shrouds, which give us another 6% reduced damage taken and extra evade chance, means we will have a few decent defensive layers. We can also take a Kintsugi for more defense, but at the cost of a Carcass Jack, which is the hands down best chess piece for this build. For the Ascendancy Order, we are going to pick up first Patient Reaper for the increased dot damage and huge sustain. Second, we will be going for Ghost Dance for the Ghost Shrouds. Our third Ascendancy from Merc Lab will be Escape Artist for the bonuses to Ghost Shroud and the free energy shield and evasion rating. And lastly, from Uber Lab, we will pick up Prolonged Pain. This gives us so much damage and duration, it is crazy. Let's talk about the leveling tree very quickly. The gist of this leveling tree is we're going to pick up chaos damage that is nearby the shadow start. So we're going to come out of shadow picking up chaos damage, getting the damage over time and skill effect duration. Chaos damage, we'll get some life, energy shield, area of effect damage, and we'll go and get the hybrid life and energy shield. We'll grab the atrophy, chaos damage over time multiplier wheel, as well as the life that is nearby. We'll come down here for Hunter's Gambit for more chaos damage over time and damage over time with bow skills. Remember to do Normal Lab at the end of Act 3 or some way through Act 4 and pick up Patient Reaper for increased damage and very, very good sustain and recovery. From 35 to 55, we're going to pick up Growth and Decay for increased life regeneration, and we're going to get the Acrobatics chain for acrobatics and phase acro. We're going to come down and get Master Fletcher for increased damage over time with bow skills and attack speed. Herbalism for more life. And we'll come down and get Wind Dancer so that we take less damage when we've been dodging. From 55 to 70, we're going to get Thick Skin, the life near Wind Dancer, and Farsight for our damage over time and attack speed with bows, and the same with Avatar of the Hunt. Increased damage over time with bow skills and a little bit of move speed. We're also going to come over here and get Method to the Madness, increased chaos damage and chaos damage multi, and Revenge of the Hunted for increased evasion rating and life, with the most important one being the Elusive on kill. Elusive is a buff that grants you 15% chance to dodge spell or attack hits, as well as 30% movement speed. Now, the buff effect is reduced over time, and once it hits 0, it's removed, so you may gain Elusive again. This is very nice to speed up our clear speed and give us a tiny bit more survivability. For Merciless Lab, we want to pick up Escape Artist, buffing our Ghost Shrouds just that little bit more. And for Uber Lab, we pick up Prolonged Pain. Now, for the moderate setup, we're going to come out of the Wind Dancer area and come up and get the skill effect duration wheel here. And later on, once you can afford it, we're going to put a Thread of Hope with a very large ring here, so that we can pick up all of the skill effect duration up here. Pick up Harrier for increased attack, cast, and movement speed, as well as a free Overcharge for power, frenzy, and endurance charges on kill. We also will pick up this little life node here, which gives us some extra life recovery from flasks, max life, and flask effect. Overall, this Thread of Hope is huge, as getting the skill effect duration makes our pods last much longer and lets us overlap our damage over time abilities much more. For the endgame cluster setup, we will have to sacrifice some life nodes here and there, but these are all very good, and they are all super important to maximize our damage over time. Touch of Cruelty is very nice, giving us a hinder on hit, with hinder making enemies take 10% increased damage. Wicked Pal, which is the most important cluster jewel node that you can pick up for this ability. It gives 35 chaos damage and 10 skill effect duration, which is huge. If you want, Unspeakable Gifts is another nice one, giving us a 10% chance to explode enemies on kill, making our clear much cleaner. Now, on the medium clusters, you want Wicked Paul and Flow of Life for increased damage over time and maximum life. Wicked Paul, we want on every cluster jewel that we can get. It is the single, hands down, most important node you can pick up on your cluster jewel. So we're going to do the exact same for our other medium cluster. If you can get Flow of Life, that is nice, but the main focus here is Wicked Paul, as the skill effect duration is huge. Next, let's talk about leveling the build. Now, as a shadow, once you get through the Twilight Strand, you will have to buy a bow from the vendor and buy Caustic Arrow, which is very worth it. We can use Caustic Arrow and Pierce all the way from level 1 to 8 for all of our damage needs. At level 8 though, we will unlock Void Manipulation, and if you do have the 3 green links, you should socket it there. Now, for Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain, you do not need any flat damage or anything on your bow. The only thing we worry about is plus levels and damage over time. For Toxic Rain, we unlock this at level 12. Right before you fight Merveil, you are going to unlock this ability, and it is very worth it to pick up. We're going to use this for clear and for our single target setup. When you get Toxic Rain, link it to Mirage Archer. Mirage Archer is going to speed up your clear, and it's going to supplement your single target damage by allowing you to have many more pods that overlap on the ground. At level 8, you can also link Void Manipulation if you have a 3 green link open for your Toxic Rain setup. While you're Toxic Raining bosses, it is a very good idea to keep Caustic Arrow, level it up, and link it to a couple things, as extra single target damage is always nice. You can throw a Caustic Arrow out at the boss, let it sit on the ground, dealing its damage over time, and shoot out your Toxic Rains. For our movement abilities while leveling, we're going to pick up Dash at level 4, Flame Dash at level 10, and Smoke Mine as well at level 10 if you can afford it for the 1 transmutation orb cost. Smoke Mine is very good if you can use it at the same time as Flame Dash, as you can Smoke Mine, detonate the mine, and Flame Dash, allowing you to move instantly across the map and gain the Smoke Mine buff, which, as you can see, gives increased movement speed as it levels, starting at 11% movement speed at level 1, going up to 30% movement speed at level 20. It is like having a whole extra pair of boots on your head. 30% movement speed is huge. It is very much worth it to learn how to Smoke Mine and Flame Dash if your fingers can handle it. I can only do this for league starts. I cannot use Smoke Mine, Flame Dash much longer than a few days, as my fingers start to hurt. For our auras, in Act 2, we're going to pick up Skitterbots, which gives us free shock and free chill. Shock does increase the damage our damage over time does, so worry not. It is useful. In Act 3, we're going to pick up Malevolence, giving us more damage over time and increased skill effect duration. We're going to pick up Despair as well for our curse. Every build that needs a curse, and our curse is going to be minus chaos resistance and increased damage over time from damage over time effects. Don't forget in Act 2 to pick up Vicious Projectiles at level 18. This gives us 40% more chaos damage over time with our abilities. After talking to Lily in Act 6, she will task you with clearing the Twilight Strand. It is very important you go and do this, because this allows us to buy Spell Totem and Multiple Totem support, which will equip with Wither. Wither, as I talked about before, is a stacking debuff up to 15 times, with each stack giving increased chaos damage taken to whomever has the Wither debuff. This increases our damage by a lot, and you absolutely need to have this support so you can have very good single target damage. Every chaos damage over time build needs this. Whether you're Essence Drain, Toxic Rain, Poison, anything, all of them need this Wither debuff to have single target damage. Now, once we hit maps, our Toxic Rain setup is going to be Toxic Rain, Vicious Projectiles for more chaos damage over time, Mirage Archer so that we get free actions on packs, allowing us to keep running while our Mirage Archer kills things for us, Void Manipulation for more chaos damage over time, and Efficacy for more damage over time and increased skill effect duration. That is very good. Now for our 6th link, we will choose Swift Affliction for 47% more damage over time, but at the cost of reduced duration of our supported skills, which is very bad. Now, later on, when you can afford it, swapping out Swift Affliction for an Empower is a very good idea, as this is a chaos damage over time build that scales with levels, just like a spell. The higher the Toxic Rain level, the more base chaos damage over time this ability will do. Again, Wither is extremely important for your boss and single target damage. You need an entire items links dedicated to getting your Wither debuffs out as fast as possible. Most importantly, you need Wither, multiple totems, and spell totem setup with faster casting as an extra link to get Wither stacks out faster if you want. Although this is not needed, and you can sub this out for something else if you are starving for links. For our movement abilities, we will use Dash with Second Wind for an additional use and increased cooldown recovery speed. We will link Dash, Second Wind, and Steel Skin together so that we can have Steel Skin on our left mouse button, allowing us to have a 2,200 damage buffer. Linking Second Wind to Steel Skin allows us to have Steel Skin up much more frequently. We will also use Vol Grace in our defensive setup, as it gives us 34 chance to dodge attacks and spells, which is huge, getting us to the dodge cap. For our auras, we are going to use Malevolence for the damage over time and skill effect duration, and Flesh and Stone so that nearby enemies are blinded, and so that we take less damage from attacks from enemies that are not nearby. On bosses, we will have a Vol Clarity so that we can spend as much mana as we want, as Vol Clarity makes it so you and nearby allies' skills cost no mana. And lastly, we will use Blood Rage to give us free Frenzy charges, as well as a nice amount of attack speed. In our boot setup, we are going to use Despair, Curse on Hit, Frenzy, which is an attack that will also give Frenzy charges, and Culling Strike, so that when a boss hits 10% life or lower, they will instantaneously die when hit with this ability. Later on, you might pick up a Witchfire Brew Flask. In that case, you can take off the Despair and Curse on Hit if you feel you have the flask up for the majority of the boss fight. Or you might get a Despair on Hit ring. In that case, completely take out the Curse on Hit and Despair, and just leave a Frenzy and Culling Strike setup so that you can cull annoying bosses like Cyrus before they are actually at 0 life. Next, let's talk about some of the gearing for our League Start Toxic Rain. As soon as you can, you want to set up a search so that you can find a Quill Rain. Quill Rain will carry you all the way to red maps, as the physical damage on it does not matter, and all we care about is the attack speed, letting us and our Mirage Archer get out many, many more Toxic Rain pods that are going to deal a lot of damage over time. On every other piece of gear, the only thing we want to look out for is life and resistance. We're looking for life and res so that we can craft 1 extra resistance on there, because we need to have our resistances capped before we get into maps. Our body armor, gloves, boots, amulet, both rings, and belt are all going to be life, res, and crafted resistance. The important flasks to have for this build is a instant life flask with bleed immunity, and enduring mana flask, so that the mana flask effect is not removed at full mana, allowing us to spam our Toxic Rain without having to micromanage our mana flasks. We can just pop it, and it's going to keep giving us mana for the full 4.9 second duration, even if we hit full mana. We want a silver flask for the onslaught buff, giving us 20 attack, cast, and movement speed. We want a jade flask with reflexes on it, if you can, to give us a lot more evasion rating. And lastly, we want an alchemist quicksilver flask of adrenaline, giving us movement speed and increased effect and reduced duration. Now, out of all of these flask effects, the most important one you want to focus down is having staunching, which is removing bleed and immune to bleed during flask effect. You need this on one of your flasks, and you need warding on one of your flasks, because when you're trying to map on League Start and you roll something like temporal chains, ally weakness, or vulnerability, you're going to be much slower and you're going to die much more frequently if you do not have this warding. While you pop this flask, you are immune to all map curses, which is huge, because when you get cursed with ally weakness, it is getting rid of 30 of your resistances, which is insane. It is so important to have capped resistances so you don't get one-shot. If you have ally weakness on you throughout the whole map, you are just going to get rando one-shot all of the time. And this is why, is because you do not have a warding flask. This is huge. You need to have one. For the cheap gear setup, we are going to use Quill Rain. All the way throughout the entire game, Quill Rain is amazing. We are just going to keep using it. On our quiver, you want to make sure you can get a Shark Tooth base, as the +4 life gain for each enemy hit by our attacks is very, very good. Since our Toxic Rain is out so much and hits twice per attack, this gives us a lot of life gain. Our helmet is going to be the same, life and resistance, but our body armor is going to be the amazing Carcass Jack. Oh my gosh, this chest piece is so crazy for this build. We get life, we get evasion rating and energy shield, which, combined with our Escape Artist Trickster Ascendancy, makes us have even more energy shield because of how much evasion rating the Carcass Jack gives. We get all resistance and 50% increased area of effect. This is huge for our overlapping pods. This lets us overlap so many more and do so much more damage. And on top of that, we get increased area damage as well. This chest piece is amazing and might be your endgame chest piece for the entirety of this build. Our gloves are going to be life and resistance. Our boots are going to be focused on the movement speed first and foremost, and our resistances second, with life being the lowest priority on the boots. Our amulet, we want to grab a strength and intelligence base, as we are in the dexterity side of the tree and are going to be struggling for strength and int. Our ring is going to be profane proxy, as this is a very cheap and very good ring. It gives +3 levels to our socketed curse gems, and we're going to put it in our left. This is very important. Put it in your left ring slot. This is going to override your Skitterbot's chilling aura and instead make it have a despair aura, because we are going to put our despair curse inside of it so that we do not have to self-cast our despair curse, making us much faster once we hit map bosses and throughout the entire map as well. Now, to use this, you will have to drop Flesh and Stone, which is 100% worth it when you're in white and yellow maps. On top of this, the ring gives 25 cold and 25 lightning resistance, which is very nice to cap our resistance. Our other ring, life and resistance, and our belt is life and resistance as well. With our mana flask staying the same in this tier, we need staunching and warding first and foremost. For the moderate gear setup, we are still going to use Quill Rain, still using a Shark Tooth Quiver with life and resistance if you can get it. But in our helmet, we are going to pick up Devoto's Devotion, giving us an insane amount of dexterity, a lot of attack speed, armor and evasion rating, 20 cast resistance, which is very helpful, as cast resistance is sort of difficult to obtain on League Start, and 20% movement speed, another pair of boots on top of your head. This is going to skyrocket our clear speed as we blast through white and yellow maps. Still using Carcass Jack, as this will be the best chest piece we can obtain for almost all of the game. Our gloves are going to be life and resistance again, but our boots are going to be at Zeri's step. Since we are a dodge build, the life, the 30 move speed, and the 15 chance to dodge spell damage is huge for our survivability. This amulet and these crafts are very important to try to obtain as quickly as possible. The non-channeling skills have minus to total mana cost. If we can get this on both rings and our amulet, our Toxic Rain mana cost will go down to the single digits, making it very, very easy to sustain. On our rings, we want to try and get Despair on hit. If you don't or cannot obtain this, it's totally fine to still use Profane Proxy to get our Despair Curse. For our second ring, we are going to want life, resistance, and the non-channeling skills have minus mana cost. As we can only craft this on rings and amulets, it's very important to get it on each piece. Our belt is going to be a Stygian Vice with life and resistance, allowing us to obtain an Onslaught on Kill Murderous Eye Jewel. Onslaught on Kill jewels are very nice and very important, allowing us to completely drop our Onslaught Flask and instead pick up Witchfire Brew. Now, you only need one source of Despair. If you have Witchfire Brew already, feel free to not get a Despair on hit ring. But if you do have a good Despair on hit ring, then you can completely skip Witchfire Brew, as you don't need multiple sources of Despair. If you can craft the non-channeling skills have minus total mana cost on your amulet and both rings, this also allows us to drop our mana flask, as we no longer need the insane mana recovery that it gives. Now we're on to the expensive section. These items are all goals to work towards. These are not expected to have. You do not need them for the endgame or red maps or Cyrus. These are just really cool, all right? They're super, super cool, and it's something that you can kind of like climb and work your way towards. Most of them are going to be rare items, as a lot of the hunter mods are very powerful for our build. The goal bow, you don't need this, right? It's just cool, is going to be plus level of socketed gems. Bow attack fires 2 additional arrows, damage over time multiplier, and we can craft plus 2 level of support gems, giving our power another 2 levels, and chaos damage over time multiplier. Now, if you are going to go for a toned down version of this, I would pick up just the plus level of socketed gems and any additional arrows you can fire, and just craft the plus 2 support gems on there and the chaos damage over time multiplier. The biggest thing you can get for this build is plus levels to your Toxic Rain. For our quiver, we can obtain a lot of damage over time multiplier, attack speed, life, and the important part here is the bow attacks fire an additional arrow, giving us a whole extra spore pod to damage. The important thing on this helmet is going to be the nearby enemies have -9 chaos resistance, letting us have more damage with our damage over time. For our enchant, the best one is Toxic Rain fires 1 additional arrow, giving us again another spore pod. Who would have thought Carcass Jack is still the hands down best chest piece for this build? 50% area of effect and 50% area damage is actually insane for this build. Our gloves can pick up some attack speed and chaos damage over time multiplier, filling out the rest of the mods with life and resistance. Our boots are going to be life, res, movement speed, and tailwind if you can afford it. The amulet on hunter base can roll +1 level of chaos skill gems and +1 level of dexterity skill gems, giving our toxic rain another 2 levels, filling out the rest with life resistance and chaos.multi if you're a little spicy. Our ring is going to be despair on hit with life, resistance, and the crafted minus mana cost. This ring is going to be the exact same, maybe filling out a few stats and getting another minus mana cost craft. For our hunter belt, the endgame goal here is going to be chaos damage, flat maximum life, and % maximum life, as well as triple resistance. For our abyss jewel that we're going to put in our Stygian Vice, the hands down best jewel that you can get, and it is normally about 1 exalt, is going to be a corrupted blood cannot be inflicted on you on an onslaught on kill abyss jewel. This is very good as it frees up an entire flask slot, allowing us not to use a silver flask for onslaught anymore, and gives us corrupted blood immunity, which you should have even if it's on some random stinky jewel. Corrupting blood immunity is going to be huge, as getting this allows us to drop our bleed flask as well, and it makes the Cyrus fight much easier because he does apply bleed stacks, and you might run out of your bleed flask eventually, and just having immunity to it makes it very nice and makes the fight much easier if you get clipped by one of his beams. For our flasks, we are going to use Witchfire Brew if you do not have Despair on hit, or just like the increased damage over time and a higher level Despair aura. We are also going to get a Dying Sun Flask, which gives us 2 additional projectiles, which means 2 pods, and 20% increased area of effect. This flask gives us huge damage, and it is very worth it. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed the Toxic Rain League Start build guide. If you did, or if you have any questions, come hit me up on Twitch or YouTube. All the links are right down there. Join me for League Start. It'll be fun. I'll see you guys then. Please sub. Goodbye.